people need to understand it's absolutely ludicrous. That is something that is not going to happen. It's not. I understand.
But I'm also a supporter on the idea of requesting. I don't want to say it's a demand, but requesting something that is achievable. What happened with the Snyder cut made sense. We knew that there was a cut of this film in some form or fashion out there. So asking for that to be released was understandable. We weren't asking what Zach did by shooting additional footage. That wasn't part of the ask. None of that was what we were requesting. We simply, and a lot of fans were simply okay with the idea of giving us what was cut together, not finishing even the production, just putting out what was sitting there. So the fact that this idea that, oh, we got the Snyder cut, so we can absolutely get the rest of the Snyderverse done, that's just wild to me. It doesn't make sense. Like, why do people, the two don't correlate? But what also aggravates me, and you touch on it a little bit, is there's no one direction that this fandom wants to go in, because you have some who say, oh, we just want the last two Justice League films. No, we want the Batman, Justice League 3, we want Cyborg, we want this, we want that, and we want 10 movies. And then there's some people who are like, dude, just do whatever. In this fandom, they don't have a direction. They don't have somebody who's willing to, for lack of a better term, lead the fandom. What happens at that point is you have people that they're screaming to sell the Snyderverse. You have people screaming just to restore the Snyderverse. You have people like me, and I'm not saying that what I'm requesting is any better, because I'm just simply saying animate the Snyderverse, but there's no one direction going. And it would be easier for a studio to take a look and say, okay, the fans want this. Can we make this happen? But instead, what they're seeing is, we want this or nothing, or we want this or not. It even falls down to like the Henry Cavill stuff. Henry Cavill is our Superman. That was the hashtag. Henry Cavill is our Superman. So they bring Henry Cavill back as Superman. Nope, we don't want that Superman. Well, that's not what you said. You said Henry Cavill is my Superman. We gave you him, and now you don't want him. So guess what? We're going and doing something new now.
Paul Abney and Mike DeLuca, they wanted the Snyderverse to continue. They wanted it. But people fail to realize is that anything that was already into fruition, they have to realize is that once James Gunn and Peter Sheffrin, and once they announced DC Studios, once they announced that, anything that pertained to Warner Brothers Pictures and Warner Pictures alone became, they didn't have the power no more to make that call.
Yeah.
All right? They didn't have that power to make that call. They gave everything to James Gunn. Now, when you look at the timeline of how everything goes, even James Gunn even said it himself. When he was doing Galaxy, when they asked him to do Superman at first, he turned it down. Mm-hmm. Why? Because he was doing Guardians. He was doing Guardians at the time, so he turned it down. And he also said that he really didn't know how to approach it and know how to do it. So he had the right to change his mind. Now, we wasn't expecting the James Gunn and Peter Sheffrin to be co-CEOs and be head of DC Studios. That was pretty much off of everybody's radar. I couldn't have called that. No. So my thing with that is that once he was announced to be head of DC Studios, where everything DC that pertains to gaming, movies, all that magnitude of all that, then that is where anything from the board that's with just Warner Brothers Pictures, that got canceled because they appointed him to be head, and he have his own direction. And Zaslav even stated they're going to have a 10-year process. And Zaslav stated this before DC Studios was even in fruition. He stated this. So he wanted to have a plan. He had the plan. And within that plan, he said, we're going to make the Trinity the pillar of this universe. What we want to start with. James Gunn came in. He was writing Superman. He wrote it. He wanted to go with a younger version, which makes sense. And at the same time, the thing that I try to tell people a lot is that the Snyderverse has a lot of baggage. There was a lot of Band-Aids pertaining to it. It had a lot of baggage. It had a lot of Band-Aids. And a lot of stuff pertaining to it was tarnished a lot. Outside of Gal Gadot, everything else was tarnished. A lot of it. You got to remember, you got Jason Momoa, he's tied to Amber Heard. That's already going to be messing up, okay? You got Henry Cavill and his situation on what was going on because people perceive Henry Cavill to be this person. You got Ben Affleck. He had a problem with the former regime in the studios with that. You got Zack Snyder. He's not there anymore. He's at Netflix. You got all these things that's going on. And now, since all the news and everything has came out, what happened to everybody with the situation with Justice League, what happened after BVS, all this stuff is all clear now. What happened and pertaining what happened to the old former regime. That the former regime tarnished that. It's like they really tarnished it. So the general casual audience is going to see that for what it is. The fans that's really dived into it, we understand it, we know it, what actually happened. It's not going to bother us that much. But the main people is the general casual audience for what they perceive and what they know and what actually happened moving forward. So the James Gunn thing, you know, people have to realize he's establishing his own universe. He's establishing something that David Zaslav wanted. He asked him. He gave him the keys. They're not going to interfere with anything. Now, if they do decide to do anything else outside of that, they have an Elseworld division. But they don't have the funds and the finances to even do that.
Not right now.
Not right now. They couldn't even do it if they wanted to. For the people that don't understand business and how it works in film, you got to understand is that there are 5 categories when it comes down to making a movie. All right? First of all, you got production. All right? You got to have a budget. That's the first thing. The budget. You got to find out the set. You got to get all that stuff for the actuals at the production budget. That's the first thing. Then you got to do merchandising. All right? Because you got to merchandise the products. Next thing, you got marketing. All right? The next thing is there's a lot of paperwork in terms and conditions and contracts when it comes down to how is in terms of the budget, these people have to get paid and what you're going to pay them. Last but not least, scheduling. How are you going to get all these individuals and people to be on the same page when they got other things that they got to do? Okay? And last but not least, age. They not young. They getting old. They very old. A lot of them is getting old. They say, well, we can get it in 10 years. I'm like, really? Henry Cavill will probably be 50 years old by the time it gets done. Ben Affleck will be close, pushing 60-something.
Yeah.
You got to think about that. So there's a lot of things when it comes down to that. So it's like I say, you know, and the merchandising and the marketing, that's one of the main things. And the thing is, Netflix don't market.
Even there's people like, oh, let's sell it to Universal or let's sell it to this company. It's like, it doesn't matter because, you know, getting back to what we said or what you said at the beginning of this, it doesn't make financial sense at all. You know, let's just take the Netflix aspect. First off, if Warner Brothers DC was going to license out the IP for these characters, and let's not just think it's going to be Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman. No, it's got to be the villains. It's got to be the side characters. It's got to be... That's a lot of characters that they would have to license out. Mm-hmm. You're talking about probably close to, you know, $100 million, $200 million, if not more, simply to license them out. And I know some people are saying it'd probably be like $500 million to do that. And then they would have to put the budget in for a movie, which a movie budget for a superhero film usually runs anywhere between $100 million to $300 million, depending on the scope and scale of it. So already the company would be in nearly $1 billion, if not more, before they even see any kind of revenue coming back their way. Not to mention then they would be competing with that company they took or they borrowed the rights from because they're doing a universe with the same characters elsewhere. Exactly. So then they have to compete. So it makes no sense. You know, again, if we can all get on the same page, that's all I keep saying. Get on the same page. Stop bashing James Gunn. Stop bashing David Zaslav. Stop bashing the studio. This is a different regime. These are not the people that in 2017 kicked Zack Snyder out of the studio. These aren't the same people that abused Ray Fisher. These aren't the same people who cause so many problems. This is a new regime that has a plan for what they want to do.
Absolutely.
But if we can respect them, if we can get together and have one goal, one vision that is achievable, the chances of us getting the continuation and animation, it just skyrockets. But if the fandom constantly belittles James Gunn, David Zaslav, you think they're going to sit there and say, sure, we can animate, sure, we can do that? No, they're never going to want to, because they can easily, and this is another thing that's a little side note, they could, because they're doing it with Amazon, they could license out the animation side of these characters.
They could do
because that is completely different. So that's something that could go to Netflix, go to Amazon, go somewhere else. If James Gunn doesn't want to deal with it, if he says, you know what, let's put a package together, shop it around, let's see if a studio wants to take it and run with it with Zach. They could try that. But they're not going to ever do anything like that if we continue to be a fan base that treats them like assholes.
And the piggyback, because you make great points. And the piggyback off of that is that y'all have to realize is that the fan base, and I mean there's millions of us. Don't get me wrong. It's millions of us, okay? They don't outweigh the general audience. They don't.
No, they don't.
And you have to understand is that that's what they're going for.